Hello, amateurs. Welcome to another episode of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some wonderful rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got an amazing guest for you today. I played with this man at Esher Rugby Club. We toured with the British Lions in 2017, and he describes himself as a reformed rugby keeno. Please welcome Mr. Simon Goldsmith. Goldie, how are you?
TT, how are you, mate?
Very, very well. Now, I'd like to start, if we can, with that statement. It's on your Twitter bio, reformed rugby keeno. What does that mean exactly?
Oh, mate, it means I used to be really into my rugby, and now I resent everything about it. And obviously, it just means it is what it is, right? It's an amazing sport that's given me loads of memories, but the body doesn't thank me for it.
So, how exactly how keen were you? Would you say? Because there's players at all different levels and all different levels of keenness as well. So where were you?
Probably mega on the wherever mega sits on the scale. Mega keen. It was to the extent that I can still remember making career decisions and where I was going to go before university and after university depended on me being able to still play rugby and kind of keep continuity of selection and all that kind of stuff. So it informed my life choices for at least until my kind of 2021. Then I had a bit of an injury and took a break from the game, reset, and then came back. But so yeah, it went mega keen up until I guess about 2021. Then with a bit of perspective and bit of age, maybe a bit more balanced in my outlook on the game.
And when did that start for you? When did that keenness come in? Were you a player originally and then you grew into it, or were you always super keen from the get-go?
No, I remember playing it as a kid. But my first ever introduction to rugby, we were living in Hong Kong, and Dad took me along to the local rugby club, and I hated it. I think there was some sort of contact, hurt my knee. I was like, nah, this isn't for me. So that must have been about 5, 6, 7, and then didn't play it at all. We moved to the Middle East, and then I kind of picked it up again. Dad likes to say that I was inspired by Gareth Edwards. But I do remember Gareth Edwards touring and Gavin Hastings touring, coming to the local rugby club, and that kind of got me interested. But I was still more interested in football. I was still all about Liverpool, Kenny Dalglish, kind of obsessed with the mid-'80s Liverpool team, and wasn't really keen on that. I played rugby, but I wasn't super keen on it. And then when we moved back to the UK, the school that I went to only played rugby, which was kind of the worst thing ever, that I was going to lose football. And then started that, and football just completely fell away and rugby became everything. So I guess from about 12, 13, rugby took over as the only sport I was really interested in.
Yeah. Were you any good at football?
Look, I raw athleticism was there, and the work ethic. Unfortunately, I had 2 left feet, so the effort was there. All right, I definitely scored well for effort, not so much on ability.
Yeah,
which is why I became a hooker in rugby. Right, it's kind of it's only one good thing. Only one thing my foot was good for, which was hooking it back in
the. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned you were a hooker. Certainly, that's when I knew you, playing with you. Were you always a hooker, or did you try other positions as well as you're coming up?
Look, right from day one, I was a hooker, and this is kind of I'm not sure it's a conversation that we've ever had. Fair weathered front row who used to be in the back row and kind of found his way in the front row, probably not through choice. I chose to be a hooker. Loved it. I can remember actually every time I'd come up against somebody who's a converted back row, or played in the centres or something, and either they'd not grown enough or just weren't good enough in that position, and so decided hooker was the way they would get their spot. I always really resented it because I kind of was so into the craft and the the skills it took to be a proper hooker. I can remember like 13, 14, I had a coaching clinic with Brian Moore. I was like, this is it. This is my position. I'm just going to be really, really good at this one position. I don't want to play anywhere else.
Amazing. I mean, you've called it right there about me. That's for sure. I was definitely pushed into it. Grew to love it for sure.
Well, yeah, but you had an engine, mate. You see, this is the thing. This is the bit that always worried me about converted back rows, is they had much more of an engine than those of us and that came back to bite me in later years. Actually, I remember when we had our fitness targets at Esher, the hookers were given the same fitness targets as the back row. And that was awful. I ended up basically in bleep test club week after week because I couldn't hit the bleep test target. Because I just didn't have the cardio.
Trying to compete with people like Sam Stitcher, which is just impossible for anybody.
Yeah, no top end speed, but can go forever. Sorry, Sam.
So did you, like, back in the day, you mentioned the Brian Moore thing then. Did you work really hard at it in terms of like your scrummaging and your line-out throwing in particular, I guess?
Yeah. Although my teammates probably said there's no evidence of all of that practice, but yeah, I did work. I worked pretty hard at kind of at the basics, not least because I'm not blowing my own trumpet. I was pretty rapid. So, it was, I always had that string in my bow, which always seemed to call into question. Well, obviously your scrummaging or your line out's going to be a bit suspect. I think it's fair to say that I did line out was definitely a problem area for me that I had to work on all the way through. But scrummaging, I always found I was a strong scrummager, and I kind of took quite a lot of pride in that part of that's the bit that I enjoyed more than anything else, if I'm honest. I did enjoy. I was guaranteed, 30 or 40 really confrontational, nasty kind of niggly, properly physical events every match. That bit, that's why I love playing hooker.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so I'm going to go away from that then and ask more about the line-out throwing. What part of it was where it struggled? Maybe was it? Do you think it was like technically the actual throwing of the ball itself, or was it like the confidence? Maybe what do you think?
Yeah, it was the mentality. It was the mentality. It's kind of the golfing yips. I definitely had the mechanics down. Pretty 15 or 16. I was able on a training pitch to pretty regularly hit the uprights and consistently get the same heights and arc on a ball. But the challenge was when it came to a game condition and you're hitting a scrum or you've hit something really aggressively, whether that's a tackle or a ruck or whatever, then having to kind of instantly zone in, calm, go into your computer mode of throwing the same line out that you've thrown 100 times before. That was hard, and it was more the kind of how do I turn off the kind of the aggression and get into kind of super calm mode. I got a lot better at it the older I got. That was the thing that kind of got a lot better.
Yeah, that comes a lot with experience as well, doesn't it? And people talk about how hard it is for goal kickers to do that, but I would say it's exponentially harder for hookers who are right in the heat of the battle to then hit a moving target more often than not, rather than the static one as well. So
you're normally carrying a few kind of niggles and stuff through a match as well. So it's like your shoulders are always operating at 100%, and you got freedom of movement and all that kind of stuff. So there was always it was doable. Like I say, I got a lot better, which shows you can do it with practice and the right kind of get yourself in the right mindset.
Yeah, let's talk about the first time when our paths really crossed, which ironically neither of us can particularly remember.
No, it's great, but you're Stato, so it's all right. You've got a record of it.
Yeah. So the story is, I was digging through my old programs and I came across, it was my first ever game I played for Kent senior side. I remember the game clearly, and I looked along the program and you were playing hooker, and I sort of put it in front of you and you're like, I don't really remember that either.
Do you remember you remember who the opposition was?
Sussex, I think.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I think it was Sussex. But talk to me more about the bigger story about playing for Kent, Goldie, and sort of what that meant to you.
Honestly, it was kind of up until all the way through. It's kind of the highest representative honours I ever got was playing for Kent. So I went through all the age groups, and while I kind of did trials for kind of regionals, London and South East, and that sort of stuff. It was kind of Kent that was my main representative honours, I guess. And it was the year after I think I finished at university, that might have been the end of that kind of season, was when we had a run with the Kent seniors and we got to Twickenham. And I played with one of your mates, Griff, was in the second row, but a whole bunch of characters who are kind of quite well known across, or certainly were kind of well known across the Kent rugby scene. Played for Canterbury and Blackheath and all sorts. And it was a cool county to play for, because there's an awful lot of schools in Kent that play rugby, but it's not particularly a rugby county. I think they were in the Bill Bowman final this weekend, actually, and I'm not sure of the result. We'll have to look that up. But
I can tell you.
Who won? It was Lancashire, wasn't it? Lancashire, Kent.
Kent won 39-37.
No way. That's an awesome game. So that's kind of 90 odd years or something since they'd been in the championship final. So we got a bit of a run. It was I think it was in the middle tier competition. Really great bunch of lads, not all from all kind of different clubs across the county. My home club was Tunbridge Wells, where I'd kind of grown up and kind of gone to school. And so I played bits and pieces of the season for them, coming back for university and that sort of thing, and then got the call up for Kent. And yeah, it was an awesome run. It was, and like I said, we got to the final, played I think it was Notts, Links and Derby in the final, which was pretty much a Northampton reserve team, and we got pumped in the final, unfortunately. But yeah, great run, some really good nights out on the way, and then a cracking night out after Twickenham, where we all ended up, I think, in the Clapham Grand, and tore the place apart. It was great. It was really good. It was good fun.
Like, I'm sure it would have been brilliant to win, but like, how close is it? Because I'm sure, like, it was still an incredible experience, even though you didn't get to lift the trophy and stuff.
Oh, playing at Twickenham, yeah, it was awesome. I did play there before. We won the National Cup when I was a kid, but just drop that one in there. It's when Daily Mail sponsored it. I don't know whether they still do, but it's so the National Schools Cup, we won that when we were 15. Had a really talented group at my school, and so it was kind of my second trip to Twickenham, but it is a bit more special when you're an adult, I think. And yeah, it was like I say, it's the journey as well, isn't it? You're playing rugby with a really good group of lads, and you've had a few nights out and a few kind of incidents along the way and on the pitch, and then you get to run out at Twickenham against, and it's it's a decent sized crowd as well. It was pretty special.
Yeah, on a smaller scale, it's almost like a sort of a Lions type thing, isn't it? Where you've been battering hell out of a lot of these guys throughout the course of the seasons, and then you come together as a team during a relatively short period of time, bond pretty quickly, and if you get some success, then it can really, really snowball.
No, you're totally right. There's something a little bit special about the County Cup, I think, in terms of that. You're exactly right. Like bringing players together who normally play against each other, and then and the standard of rugby is pretty decent, because they do tend to be the kind of the standout players for their club teams. So bring them together, and it tends to be a pretty good team.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other Kent teams, you played at Westcombe Park, didn't you, as well, during the sort of
that was the season after. So So
Okay.
that was the season after, yeah. So the season after Kent, I got tap on the shoulder saying, why are you playing at Tunbridge Wells? And it was, well, it's
Classic
fine.
poaching.
Yeah, exactly. And then it wasn't exactly a full career at Westcombe Park. So I think I played one pre-season game, then one league game, then went to the Harpenden Sevens and ruined my knee, which basically put paid to, well, at that point I thought it put paid to me ever playing rugby again. So it knee properly when I had a job offer to go work out in Italy for Fiat, and so I basically gave up the idea of playing rugby again. However much I loved it, I was like, right, well, this is kind of it, and this is when you grow up and you focus on your career and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of 2000 was kind of the at that point the end of me playing rugby.
Wow. Okay. So what was the injury exactly? What had you done to your knee?
Just popped my ACL,
Okay.
and because it was that kind of level of rugby as well, where you've got a decent physio, but you don't have medical cover and you don't have necessarily the best advice. The advice was, well, you can rehab it and we'll see how it goes. When actually what I just needed, MRI, ACL was snapped, and having a rebuild. But rather than that, I got the advice that you want to see if you can. And as much as I tried to rehab it and build it up, I couldn't get it right. So, and at that point, like I say, the conflation of that and a career decision made me think, right, I'll go to Italy. There's not a lot of rugby. There wasn't a lot of rugby being played in Turin, so it's not exactly a rugby hotbed. So that was it, yeah.
But knowing you as I do, like I'd imagine you gave that a really good crack. Like you'd have done everything that you could with that knee at the time. Am I right?
Yeah, it was. Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah. So but it wasn't like an informed rehab where I got proper rehab protocols and all that kind of stuff. As I say, it's very do my own research and see you just end up doing kind of general kind of fitness program and the problem was that it kept the thing that the bit that forced me to go and see a surgeon when I was in Italy was it kept going in nightclubs. So and that just wasn't impressing anyone. So
no, you can't live with that. You can't live with that.
You can't. Exactly right. So I went to see a surgeon. He was and fortunately I had really good insurance through the company, and the surgeon was the guy who did all the Juventus football team. Although probably every surgeon in Turin probably claims that. But anyway, he also does it because it's close to the Alps. There's a load of skiers and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, did the repair, and he'd kind of done the scan. He said, "Look, I'm pretty confident that you could play rugby again after this heals." As I say, there wasn't a lot of rugby to be played, but I got proper rehab protocols. I went to the same physios as the Juventus lot and all that kind of stuff, and that got me to a really good place. At which point, job changed. I moved back to the UK and went to work for the Ministry of Defence in the UK, which had me moving around the UK a bit. But I ended up in Northampton for a bit of work, and was in the same. They used to train in the Fitness First. I mean, I'm sure their training facilities have been upgraded now, but all the Northampton used to train in the local Fitness First, and I ended up doing a whole load of the same protocols as them. Got my knee into a really good shape, and when I then got moved down south and ended up in, I think it was in Farnborough, I gave a few local clubs a call, one of which was Esher. And basically, Dave Page, who's the old manager at Esher, was the friendliest voice on the other end of the phone. So that's the club that I went to do pre-season with.
Wow, amazing story. What's the timeline, Goldie, between when you injured the knee and between that turning back up at Esher? How many years?
Knee will have been October-ish 2000, and then turning up at Esher will have been 2003, pre-season 2003, 2004, something like that.
How
So it's about
nervous were you?
about 3 years out. Yeah, super nervous.
Yeah.
Like the first bit was Hugh McCarty, God bless him. He took us on. He made us do a run. So it was kind of the first session of pre-season, and we had to run round Hersham. God knows how long the run was, but my cardio's never been good at the best of times. And plus, I'm kind of having rehabbed an ACL. I'm kind of, is this really what I want to be doing? But yeah, all worked out in the end.
Yeah, because you basically played at Esher then until the end of your career, really.
Yeah, till 2010. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it about the club that that made you want to stay there and play for them for as long as you did?
Well, I think it was the initial one was, as I say, it was literally I called Welsh, Roslyn Park, load of kind of West London clubs, because I was living in Clapham at the time and kind of commuting between Clapham and Farnborough. So it was kind of all the clubs on that 3 route I called up, and literally it was the friendliest voice. Because I didn't have a lot of representative honours behind me and all that kind of stuff. So it was that's what kind of got me in the door. And then it was just a really good bunch of lads who weren't there for the money. They were there because it's a convenient location if you're working in the city. Plus, it's a really good standard of rugby, and it was this weird kind of mix or hybrid that you get at that level, where you've got people who take their rugby super seriously on the pitch, but and also in training, to be fair, but outside of it, they all appreciate there's bigger things in life, and it's kind of it's not their main job and it's not their main gig. So you've got this kind of quite cool focus when you're in the moment, but out of it, it's kind of it's just super fun and like a proper social.
Yeah, you've very well described exactly how I would describe it as well. Added into that mix, of course, as well, you had the young players coming through that were attached to Premiership clubs coming to us on loan. So sort of say a little bit about what they brought to the club and maybe what they got from us as well.
So I think that came a little bit later. So we started getting loan players, I think. It might have been our first championship year, or what was National 1 before it became the championship. And I think that's when we started getting loan players, and the loan players that really bought into it, I think you could tell they were getting a load out of it. You could tell they were kind of, well, there is kind of more to life than just, eat, train, sleep, repeat. There's people with kind of other careers and families and other stuff going on. Not that you don't have that at a professional rugby club, but it's some people with kind of a broader perspective on life that leads to kind of more interesting conversations, I guess, or something. There's just a broader range of perspectives, and you could see that they were kind of getting a bit from that, but also obviously we were getting talented kids who were able to kind of inject a bit of pace and a bit of kind of a bit of dynamism. I mean, some of them were kind of next level. I can remember, was it Don Barrell who turned up from Sarries? Just the athleticism on the dude, and and the size and the pace was just, it was awesome. It added kind of just another weapon, didn't it, to our arsenal. And the ones that bought into the ethos of being part of the team, I think really thrived and benefited both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. So what league were you in when you joined the club? Because obviously you won at least one promotion after that.
Yeah, so National 2, the old National 2, which is now National 1, I think. And the first season I joined, we nearly got relegated. So we ended up, I think we were third or fourth, we might even be second from bottom. And Hugh McCarty called in a favour from Dick Best, who came and take a few coaching sessions, and man, that was an eye opener. I've never been shouted at as much or seen as much shouting from a coach. But yeah, I mean, it worked. It turned us around, and second half of the season, or third of the season, we pulled it out of the bag, and I think we ended up sixth from bottom or something, pretty safe from relegation. And then Mike Schmidt arrived the following season, and that's when we kind of mounted our campaign to get promoted to National One, and ended up getting promoted to National One, which was cool, and that was kind of a combination of bringing in a few kind of talented ex-pros, but also kind of just uplifting all of the training that we were doing and kind of all the backroom staff. We got some S&C stuff here, S&C coaching in, and went on a proper pre-season, did some, started that tradition of a super intense 3 or 4 days, packing, a whole of a pre-season into 4 days. I started in, I think first up was Portugal. That was pretty cool.
Talk to me about some of those early trips, Goldie, because I went on 2 or 3 of the later ones, and they're pretty legendary. But what were the first ones like?
Well, they were hard work. I mean, it was pretty much 3 sessions a day. Bearing in mind, some of us were we'd put our training in, and we'd kind of do our extras, and fit as much training in around our jobs. And I think because we were playing against some teams that were pretty much fully professional, or at least, their non-professionals were all rugby development officers, and we're kind of finding a decent amount of time for training. I think what we found is we just didn't get the rest. And so this pre-season stuff didn't really help with that, because we'd pack a whole load of fitness and kind of skills stuff into 3 or 4 days. So super intensive training for 3 or 4 days, and then we'd get big kind of last night where we kind of properly blow it off and take Villamora by storm, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think I mean, all the technical and tactical and fitness and set piece work, all of that was really important. But the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, was the team bonding on the final night. Every trip like that is always the most important thing.
100%. You kind of do your court session, and you kind of make sure that everybody appreciates where they stand, and they're all kind of part of the team. It's good. It's really good. There's to be fair, we had a couple of tours where a few people fell by the way. So without naming names, they were found wanting when it came to some of the fitness drills, and I'd say it was hard work, and so they kind of got found out and found they didn't tend to come back after tour, and didn't really make it into pre-season. So it's
well,
quite
it's a
good for
tough
that.
environment, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, you've got to get through that kind of stuff if you really want to be. And again, that helps with team bonding and team morale as well. To know that you've been through something that's brutally hard like that, binds you tighter together for sure.
It's a fine line, though, isn't it? I think this is one of the things that interests me about rugby, and particularly when we are worried about mental health, and we do want it to be an inclusive sport, and we do want to make sure that people can feel free to open up and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, it is a massively confrontational game where psychology plays. Essentially, it's 15 blokes trying to bully another 15 blokes, and so I find that dynamic super interesting within a team. You've got to kind of strike that balance between asserting yourself mentally and physically on someone else, but at the same time you're their teammate, and it's I think clubs find it difficult to strike that balance. I like to think that Esher did a pretty good job of that, but I bet you there'll be a few boys who kind of look back on it and go, no, you kind of took it too far for me and that sort of stuff. Which I think that's kind of important to remember that it's not a clear-cut thing, is it?
Yeah, no, and especially at like the performance level, and that's where I've described Esher during that time. They're desperately trying to move on and get up to upper level, and things like the fitness and bonding, all that kind of stuff is really important for that. So yeah, I agree, a very difficult balance to strike. Now let's move on to something slightly different. There's a fantastic photo of you, Goldie, streaking away to score a try against London Welsh, and it encapsulates everything you said earlier about yourself, in terms of being a pacey hooker. But I don't really know the story about that try. How did it come about, and what game was it?
So, I actually scored 2 tries like that season. It was still called National One, but it's the Championship. It's what's now the Championship. We were playing against London Welsh, obviously local derby. Not that it's kind of the first season that we're having that local derby, and it was a cracking game. We played really well. I think it was Don Barrell who passed me the ball around the halfway line, and this isn't a hooker's exaggeration. It was the halfway line, and I just found myself in loads of space. And I think the Welsh winger, was expecting me to pass it because, the hooker really should have. I think I had a winger outside me, and instead of doing that, I just took off. And so I kind of caught him a bit flat-footed. So I probably had about 10 or 20 yards on him by the time he realised what was happening. So the photo has got the London Welsh winger chasing me. What you don't see is the fullback. I've forgotten the chap's name. But he got selected for England. Pacey fullback, like renowned as being and he was kind of chasing across, and I beat them both into the corner. Great photo, because the crowd's going wild, like the crowd at Esher's kind of going nuts, and yeah, it was kind of it's a pretty fun. It's not often that I got to show my pace on the pitch at that level. Not least because I didn't get I didn't get as much game time because it was, it's you got to share game time and bench time when you're a hooker, don't you? But yeah, it was definitely a highlight of my playing career. The second one was against Bedford, and again I outpaced the fullback, but that was very much, it was an interception, so it could have gone really horribly wrong. Me stepping out the line, not actually taking the not actually being in. I don't think I was properly in the defence, but I could have got properly told off for that one. But that was an interception try. Not far. I think that was about 40 meters. That one.
Well, I've never experienced anything like that. Certainly not in adult rugby. So, does the time sort of like slow down a little bit? And was it all like
it did feel like I was running through mud. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure that didn't feel like time was slowing down. It felt like the pitch suddenly got very heavy, and you kind of, all sorts of like relax your running style and all that kind of stuff go out the windows. It's just I don't know how far behind me this guy is, so I'm just going to peg it as fast as I can and dive into the corner, which worked out.
Yeah, happy days. What about the rest of the time at Esher? Were there any other sort of fixtures or people you played against that kind of stick out in the memory?
There is a. Do you know what? This is there's a few, but I'll tell a story that I love just because I think it speaks really highly of another hooker, and I don't often. I used to have massive position envy. I was awful at this. I was kind of, every other hooker on the planet I've got a grudge against. Now I'm much more measured. But we played against Northampton at Franklin's Gardens, which is an awesome stadium to play at, and the result was horrific. We lost like 74-3. They brought on Carlos Spencer with like 10 minutes to go or 15 minutes to go. It was just like what this is just not fair. But anyway, Dylan Hartley started the match. I don't think he finished it. And then also in the return match, he played. And the reason I'm telling the story is we went to Vegas same year that he was on the Lions tour and didn't because of the, got whistled off by Wayne Barnes and got suspended and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, we bump into him at one of the pool parties in Vegas at rehab, and bless, this is like two years later or 3 years later, and he was like, oh, you're the hooker from Esher. I remember playing against you. Like, this is just one game, and it's like, dude, this is, they obviously, and he was talking about how much Northampton enjoyed their kind of time down in the championship, and they really made the most of that year. It's a rebuilding year for them and all that kind of stuff, but they really made the most of the social side of it and really kind of getting into playing the game. And I just thought it was a measure of the bloke. I mean, he was enjoying himself in Vegas, but it was like, that's a nice touch. I'm not sure I remember every hooker I played against, so just a really, really mark of a good bloke. Just remembered who I was. It was nice.
Yeah,
lovely. All sorts of other moments. I think that's just, Esher was just a really, really special club to play rugby. Like I say, it was that really, really good blend of taking the rugby seriously, but not so seriously that you become a massive, massive rugby nose.
Or a bigger one than you already were.
True.
But of course, all these things have to come to an end, Goldie. And your one was like a pretty nasty injury. How did it happen? Tell me a little bit about the injury and how it all came to an end.
Yeah, it was all a bit inglorious. There was a second team game down in Plymouth, and now this is going to sound like I'm making it up. I'm genuinely not. I'm on for my hat trick. Second team game though, right? And sprinting down to score the third, and it felt like I'd been not just shot in the leg, like I'd been hit by a truck, and I ended up kind of, doing kind of almost a cartwheel in the air, landed on the ground, and what had happened is my patella tendon had snapped. So the bit that the tendon that connects your kneecap to the bottom of your leg had just completely gone, and my kneecap had ended up going up my thigh, and all of my kind of muscles had gone into spasm, and like knee was basically the muscles that normally hold your knee together were trying to kind of basically tear my leg apart. So yeah, it was so painful, screaming my head off, and all I can remember is just calling for Johnny the physio to do something, and poor bloke didn't know what to do. And fortunately, Plymouth had a home game, so there was a hospital. There was an ambulance on standby, and took me to Derriford. And our good mate James Waterhouse of the BBC, of BBC fame, he took me to Derriford, holding my leg the whole way, not realising that he basically committed himself to holding my leg for the next 2 hours while they kind of worked out how to set it and how to kind of get it all sorted. So that was a pretty nasty. Essentially, my first, when I had the operation in Italy, it hadn't healed properly. So what had happened is that I'd actually done one part of the patella tendon in training a week before, hadn't realised it, thought it was just like I'd got a bit of a sore knee, and then it snapped while I was running during the match. So yeah, what they normally do, a little bit of a wire around it, and then the scar tissue kind of heals, like knits it all back together, and you end up with a new patella tendon basically made up of scar tissue. Unfortunately, the surgeon wasn't very diligent and took in a bit of the pitch when he did the surgery, and I ended up with a really bad infection, so ended up in hospital for about 3 months while they worked out what the infection was, and because they'd made mistakes with antibiotics. So just kind of a category of, or like list of errors. and nearly actually ended up having the leg amputated because it was a kind of a flesh-eating thing. So they didn't know what it was, and they were kind of worried that it was going to give me sepsis and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a pretty emotional moment when the surgeon comes in and tells me that not only that that he's messed up the surgery, and the guy was, surgeons don't have the best bed manner at the best of times, but he came in and said, it's a real shame because when I fixed your knee when you first came in, I thought you'd play rugby again, but now you've got this infection, you've got no chance. Right? It's just rubbish. Fortunately, kind of the nurses were like, the guy's a prick. And yeah, unfortunately, they worked out what the infection was. They kind of got intravenous antibiotics, and over the next kind of 3 months, that sorted the infection out. And then really long road to kind of recovery and to walk again, because they were basically saying, look, you've got very limited chance of being able to straighten your knee properly, and you're going to walk with a limp for the rest of your life, and all of that kind of stuff. And I'll always credit her with getting me in the right mindset. But the physio at Esher is a lady called Carol McCarthy. She was the one who first spotted that it was infected and made me go back to the doctor to kind of get it sorted. So, probably credit her with saving my leg. And then just had this amazing conversation with her and said, well, I think you can play rugby again. And I kind of looked at her and went, no, I can't. And she said, no, I think you can. And it was, while I didn't believe her, she got me in that mindset that I could kind of trick myself into if I work hard enough at this, I could play again. No, like the rational bit of me knew perfectly well there's no way I was going to play rugby again. But the kind of the emotional bit of it was, well, actually, what have I got to lose by convincing myself that I can play again? And actually, I'm probably going to get a far better result if I do work as my target. So yeah, it was basically 2 or 3 hours pretty much daily, down to kind of and after a couple of months, 3 or 4 times a week, just kind of constant rehab. And it took about 2-3 years to be able to kind of walk properly again and walk normally. And then there was this amazing moment 7 years later. I'm living in Dubai, and there's a running track in the middle of the Palm, and I did a sprint session, and it was kind of this. I can remember the moment. It's like, I can sprint. It's the first time in 7 years, and I can run. It was awesome. It was an awesome feeling. But yeah, and
yeah, God.
I still credit Carol with kind of, first of all, getting me in, convincing me of the thing that, the impossible, even if it is impossible, if I believe in it, I'm going to get to a lot better position than if I don't believe it. And then secondly, obviously, giving me all the tools that I needed to a point where, now I'm playing the odd charity game, but I can run pretty much unencumbered, and lifting game strong, and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
Yeah, well, amazing story. Like, I knew that was a bad injury, and I knew about the infection, but I didn't realise there was a chance you might lose your leg as well as a result of it. That's brutal. But so would you say it's back to being like 100% now?
No, I mean, I've only got one good leg. I mean, it is model quality. It's catwalk quality. The right leg is right up there. I mean, it's incredible definition. It's so good. Like, the calf is off the chain, but the left leg is definitely lagging. Like the kneecap is about an inch, couple of centimeters higher. It's set higher, and it's kind of looks all knobbly and really gnarly. It's definitely not 100%, but it's good enough to do most of what I want to do. Like I say, I can run for about 5k comfortably enough. I can lift whatever I want. It doesn't get in the way of the kind of squats and deadlift. It works for that. And as I say, I can play the odd non-serious game of rugby, as long as everybody understands that I'm not going to do any tackling and nobody's allowed to tackle me.
Standard Um, and talking of doing fitness stuff, we were touring with the British Lions in 2017, and we got together a little.
Non-playing
We thought
tourist,
we might die, frankly. Non-playing tourists, correct. We thought with the amount of alcohol that was going to be consumed, we really needed to get this schedule going, of which you turned up in basically full Lions training kit. So still a bit of a rugby keeno, to be honest, Goldie.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do it properly, right? If you're going on tour, you go on tour. You don't half-arse it, mate. And that includes investing in the right kit.
What were some of your favourite bits of that Lions tour in 2017?
Yeah, there's so many. There's you turned up from touring the South Island, and then we got Sam Stitcher and Colm Hannon all flew in. We were there for the first test. Enjoyed that first test at Eden Park, and then hired an RV to drive over a couple of days down to Wellington. It was just good fun, wasn't it? Just four mates kind of on the piss, and then hanging out in an RV. Colm at the top. I mean, I don't know how we made that decision that we were going to put Colm at the top of an already unstable vehicle, and we've got 140 kilo plus human being rolling around at the top as we're driving around. That's definitely not safe. But yeah, we like going to what was the real name of Mount Doom? But going for a bit of a walk with you where you and I are we're doing all right. I mean, you walk a lot, and you kind of you kind of get involved when you're traveling, but Colm was definitely struggling a little bit to keep up, wasn't he, as we scaled Mount Doom. So it was kind of a bit of a flashback.
Yeah, the Tongariro crossing, that's what it's called.
Yeah, Tongariro crossing, that's it. So that was a bit of a flashback to running up and down the dunes in Newport for pre-season, where we were always a little bit worried that Elko was going to kill Colm. But to be fair to him, he got up it, didn't he? Which he always used to do in pre-season as well. He always finished it in the end. So, and it was kind of good kind of running into. That was the beauty of the Lions tour, I think, is you run into other people on the Lions tour in the randomest of places. You walk into a pub in the middle of nowhere, and from the other side of a pub, you just kind of hear Lions. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when the whole country gets taken over because of a rugby tour. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm talking of running into people. We quite often run across the players as well. And one of my favourite moments on that trip was we were driving through Wellington. Well, you were driving, I was in the passenger seat, and you just looked across me and went, "Oh, look, there's Sean O'Brien." And I was, the way you did it, I thought, well, he must be over the other side of the street, over there somewhere. I turned left, and his face was a metre from mine, stood at some traffic lights, and I was like, "Oh, hi, Sean O'Brien."
There was a Sean O'Brien thing on that trip, wasn't there? Because it was the whole the way through from 15 to 1, and you'd want Sean O'Brien to be the player. And I remember kind of singing that at the top of my lungs and turning around, and it was one of the Irish coaching staff stood right behind me, smiling at me. It was good fun. And Maro Itoje in that second test, mate. I think just seeing that in person, that's going to live with me for a long time. That was a superhuman performance, if ever I saw one, playing an awesomely talented rugby player playing kind of above the level that probably he thought was possible for 80 minutes. That was pretty special to witness in that second, and in Wellington, which is a pretty cool stadium as well.
Yeah, to have Alan Wynne-Jones walking off singing your name is probably quite a nice.
That's not a bad career highlight, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, mate, let's bring this bit to a close. We'll move on to the stash section. So what's your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
My favourite bit of stash, probably pretty early on. I went on a couple of trips to Kenya for the Safari Sevens. So it was while I was at Bristol, and got selected for the kind of the Sevens team to go over there. Played against the likes of the Zimbabwe and Kenya and a bunch of the national sides, and also few invitational like the Samurai, and fortunate enough to win it in the first year. And the stash, the safari hat, and that kind of has lived with me as, you know, the pinnacle for me of rugby stash is kind of is to an extent the randomness of the stash. So a safari hat as rugby stash is my favourite bit of stash.
That is awesome. That is first for the podcast. Well done. What's your favourite kit of all time? So this can be a team from any era.
I've got a bit of a fondness for the Super 12 kits from kind of the late 90s. You know, kind of particularly Auckland kind of sticks out. So a little bit of a fondness, but I think it's difficult to get past, and I bet you other people have said this, get past a kind of a light blue and a white stripe. So either an Argentina or a Racing as that's, you know, Racing 92 or an Argentina. I think Racing might have stuffed it in recent years and messed it up. So I'll go with Argentina. You know, a nice Argentina, you know, blue and white bit of shirt. That's probably my favourite. Yeah, I think that's probably my favourite shirt.
Cool. And what about any awful kit? Any kit you think is disgusting and should be thrown in the bin?
See, you know, I'm an inclusive kind of guy, and I think all sorts of kind of tastes should be allowed. And you know, that goes for super bright kits and, you know, floral designs. And I kind of draw a line a little bit at people putting faces and kind of people on kits. I think that looks a bit odd. And I think it was Stade Francais, I think, did that a couple of times. So I'll live with their kind of flowery kits, but I think I'll put in the bin anytime they put a human face on a kit. That just doesn't work for me.
Hyper specific. I love it. Okay, we'll bring this to a close now, mate. So is there any sort of like final thoughts, any sort of anything else you wish to say?
Oh, mate, I just think I love the fact that you do this podcast. I think it's awesome. I think there's, like you say, there's some sort of beauty or magic around both kind of the amateur game and how it kind of links up with a professional game, and the way that rugby's going at the moment, where there are a lot of voices that say that the professional game should be separate and kind of become almost its own sport, you know, whether that's played at a different time of year in the summer or whatever. You know, I'm old enough to kind of remember before professionalism. I turned like 19 or 20 just when the game went professional. So, you know, there's a bunch of mates of mine, and you know, I thought about it for a bit of going professional just when the game went professional. And there was just this about rugby at that time of working out what it is as a sport. And I think it's still in the process of doing that. And I think there's something special that you're doing here about joining up different parts of the game. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. That's pretty much what the spirit of the show is all about. So appreciate it. And it's been fantastic chatting to you. If people want to get hold of you and say hello or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm on a bit of Instagram, mate. Goldsmith on Instagram. I think my profile's public. So that's probably the social that I use most. I do some stuff, and the other stuff, the Twitters and the LinkedIn, is all kind of professional. But for fun, it's mostly Instagram.
Yeah, lots of gym pictures and stuff like that. Lots of workout stuff on there, isn't there?
Not too much, I hope, mate. You know, just enough to be inspirational for those of us in our mid-40s.
100%. And you wanted to give a shout out to someone else as well at the end of the show here.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I think there's a really good mate of mine from school who's just been diagnosed with motor neurone disease. I think all of us have been massively inspired by Doddy Weir and kind of Rob Burrow, and you know, I think it's a horrific disease, but you know, the kind of the inspirational way that those three guys have kind of dealt with it, it certainly got me off my arse to do a bit of fundraising. So yeah, shout out to shout out to My Name Is Doddy and get some more funds for MN, because it feels like one of those things that throw enough money at it, we might be able to do something about it.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Okay, thanks very much, mate. And everything that we've spoken about today, listeners, will be linked as always, and that's in one place at amateurrugbypodcast.com. So it just leaves me to say, Goldie, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a lot of fun.
Likewise. Cheers, TT.
Cheers, mate. Okay, there he goes. Simon Goldsmith, Goldie. What a fabulous guest, like really linking, as he said towards the end there, the sort of amateur and professional game. So professional game, maybe. Yeah, good to chat to you, mate. And we are fundraising for the My Name's Doddy Foundation myself. The Great Rugby Run is coming up very soon, the 9th of August to September 2nd, all the way through the south of Wales into Gloucestershire, finishing in Cheltenham, which is where I was born and bred myself. It's a million litres this year for MND, and find out everything about that at thegreatrugbrun.org. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can rate and review your podcast player, like, share, retweet, or even join the community at patreon.com/amateur rugby podcast. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're at your local rugby club. So until then, get and play.